I am Agamemnon, son of Atreus, king of Mycenae, leader of the Greeks in the Trojan War, and a man whose fate was bound to the gods and the blood of my family. My life was not one of peace or quiet contentment, but of conquest, betrayal, war, and tragedy. I stood at the pinnacle of power, but the gods are capricious, and no man, not even a king, can escape the chains of fate. My story is one of ambition and hubris, of sacrifice and revenge, of triumph on the battlefield and ruin in my own home. To understand my life, you must first know the curse that plagued my family, the house of Atreus. My father, Atreus, was the king of Mycenae, but his reign was marked by bloodshed and treachery. He and his brother, Thyestes, were rivals for the throne, and their feud became a thing of nightmares. In a fit of vengeance, my father killed Thyestes' sons and served them to him in a banquet. Thyestes, upon realizing the horror of what he had consumed, cursed my father and all his descendants. This curse would haunt me and my brother, Menelaus, and it would shape the course of my life. After my father was murdered by Thyestes, Menelaus and I were forced into exile. We wandered the lands, seeking refuge until we finally returned to reclaim our birthright. With the help of Tyndareus, the king of Sparta and my future father-in-law, we drove Thyestes from Mycenae and took the throne. But the curse of our house lingered in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I became king of Mycenae, the most powerful city in all of Greece, and my brother Menelaus married Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. Together, we forged an alliance of kings, united by blood and marriage. My wife, Clytemnestra, was Helen's sister, and thus our families were bound together. My kingdom was vast, my power unmatched, and I was determined to expand it even further. The gods, however, were never far from the affairs of men, and soon, an event occurred that would alter the course of history. Paris, the prince of Troy, came to Sparta as a guest of Menelaus, but he repaid his host's hospitality by stealing Helen away and taking her back to Troy. This act of betrayal ignited a war that would last 10 years and embroil all of Greece in a conflict that would change the world. Menelaus, humiliated and enraged, called upon me and the other Greek kings to honor the oath we had sworn to defend his marriage to Helen. As the most powerful king among the Greeks, I took command of the expedition to retrieve Helen and punish the Trojans for their treachery. I gathered the armies of Greece, Sparta, Pylos, Ithaca, Argos, and many others, and we set sail for Troy. Before we could launch our ships, however, the winds turned against us. We were stranded at Aulis, unable to sail, and it soon became clear that the gods were displeased. Calchas, the seer, revealed that Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, demanded a sacrifice that would wound me more deeply than any sword. The goddess wanted the life of my daughter, Iphigenia. She was young, innocent, and beloved by all who knew her, but the gods are cruel, and their demands cannot be ignored. I was torn between my duty as a father and my duty as the leader of the Greeks. Without the sacrifice, we could not sail to Troy, and the expedition would fail before it even began. In the end, I made the impossible choice. I sent for Iphigenia, telling her that she was to be married to Achilles, the greatest of the Greek warriors. When she arrived, however, it was not to a wedding but to an altar of death. My heart broke as she was led to her fate, but I did nothing to stop it. I watched as the blade fell, and my daughter's blood was spilled to appease the gods. The winds changed, and we set sail for Troy, but I knew that the curse of my house had claimed another victim. The war against Troy was long and brutal. For 10 years, we laid siege to the city, and though our armies were strong and our warriors brave, the walls of Troy stood tall and unbroken. I led the Greeks with iron resolve, commanding kings and warriors alike. But the war was not without its challenges. Achilles, our greatest warrior, was as fierce as he was proud, and his pride soon led to conflict between us. I had taken a captive woman, Briseis, as a prize of war, but Achilles, furious at the slight to his honor, withdrew from the battle. Without him, our forces suffered heavy losses, and the Trojans, led by their prince Hector, drove us back to the shores. It was only after the death of Patroclus, Achilles' beloved friend, that he returned to the fight. Enraged with grief, Achilles sought out Hector and killed him in single combat, dragging his body around the walls of Troy. But even Achilles, the mightiest of men, could not escape his fate. He was struck down by an arrow fired by Paris, guided by the hand of Apollo. As the war dragged on, I began to realize that victory would not come through strength of arms alone. The gods themselves were involved in the conflict, and it was through cunning and deceit that we finally achieved our goal. Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca, devised a plan. A great wooden horse, hollowed out to conceal a group of our best warriors. We left the horse outside the gates of Troy as a supposed offering to the gods, and then pretended to sail away. The Trojans, believing the war was over, brought the horse into their city. That night, as they celebrated, our warriors emerged from the horse and opened the gates, allowing the Greek army to pour in. Troy was sacked, its people slaughtered, and its walls reduced to rubble. Helen was returned to Menelaus, and the war was won. After the fall of Troy, I believed my troubles were over. I had led the Greeks to victory, and I was eager to return home to Mycenae and to my wife, Clytemnestra. But the gods had other plans. The journey home was fraught with dangers, as the anger of the gods followed me across the seas. Many of the Greek heroes, including Odysseus and Menelaus, faced their own trials on the way back, but my fate was the most bitter of all. When I finally returned to Mycenae, I found that my wife's heart had turned cold. In my absence, she had taken a lover, Aegisthus, a man who was none other than the son of Thyestes, the man who had murdered my father. The curse of my family had come full circle, and the shadow of vengeance hung over my house once more. Clytemnestra had never forgiven me for the sacrifice of our daughter, Iphigenia, and her hatred had festered over the years. Aegisthus, eager to claim the throne of Mycenae, fueled her desire for revenge. Together, they plotted my death. I returned to Mycenae as a king victorious in war, but I was blind to the treachery that awaited me. Clytemnestra welcomed me with false smiles and honeyed words, hiding the dagger that would soon pierce my heart. I entered my palace, unaware that it would be for the last time. As I bathed, cleansing myself of the blood and dust of war, Clytemnestra struck. She and Aegisthus attacked me, and I, unarmed and unsuspecting, fell to their blows. My blood mingled with the water, and I died not as a warrior on the battlefield, but as a victim of treachery in my own home. My death was not the end of the curse, however. My children, Orestes and Electra, would one day return to avenge me, continuing the cycle of bloodshed that had plagued our family for generations. Orestes, guided by the god Apollo, would slay both Clytemnestra and Aegisthus, but the Furies would hound him for the sin of matricide. The house of Atreus, cursed by the gods and torn apart by vengeance, would never know peace. As I look back on my life from the halls of Hades, I see the folly of my ambition and the weight of the curse that hung over my family. I was a king, a conqueror, and the leader of the greatest army ever assembled. But in the end, I was undone by my own pride and the sins of my ancestors. I led the Greeks to victory in the Trojan War, a war that has been immortalized in the songs of poets and the tales of bards. My name will forever be remembered as one of the greatest kings of Mycenae, but my legacy is stained with the blood of my daughter, my wife, and myself.